Hey guys, this is Katrina Weidman from Discovery Plus, Portals to Hell, and you're listening to the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show.
Bringing you the best in music and movie guests. It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show with Nick and Joe. It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show with Nick and Joe. It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show with Nick and Joe. It's the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show with Nick and Joe.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show, episode number 52. I am your host, Joe Sibilia, and tonight my guest is Keith Nelson. Keith is a founding member and guitar player songwriter in the band Buckcherry. Now, in 2017, Keith left Buckcherry and has been recently writing and producing with various artists. He has recently co-wrote songs with Charlie Starr of Blackberry Smoke for a few songs that have been included on their albums. It was a pleasure to have a conversation with Keith about his early days learning to play guitar, up through his days in Buckcherry, and what he's currently doing now with his producing and songwriting. We also had a great conversation about coffee, which made me realize that I really need to brush up on my coffee knowledge. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Keith Nelson. If you like the show, please make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter now. We just started our Twitter up. So go ahead and follow us on those. You can find us at R&R Coffee Show. You can also visit our website at rnrcoffeeshow.com. Hope you enjoy this episode. Keith Nelson, welcome to the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show. How are you, my friend?
I'm really, really good. How you doing, brother?
You know what, man? Let me tell you something. About 2 hours ago, I decided to go upgrade my phone. And I'm in the store, and I pick out the phone, went up to the iPhone 12 from an iPhone 6 that I have. And
okay.
So I don't upgrade very often. So anyway, so I get this phone, and then I realize it doesn't have the 3.5 jack on it, the audio jack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know this. So I say to the guy, I say, hey, does that not have the 3.5? And he looks at me like, where the hell you been? But he's like, no. I said, I need that jack. And he's like, okay.
Well, they make an adapter, don't they? Don't they make an adapter?
Well, they didn't carry the adapters. So I told the guy, I said, look, I need my old phone back. You need to reactivate my own phone because I need to use that phone in about 2 hours. Because that's how I have all this, my interface and everything going through that 3.5.
Right.
So the guy looks at me, he's like, well, you can just Bluetooth it. And I'm like, no, I need my old phone. I'm not going to try and connect a Bluetooth that I don't know anything about. Anyway, I got my old phone back. So we are here.
Oh, wow.
I was like, Keith is going to think I'm a dick because we've already rescheduled the time once.
Nah, it's all right. It's all right. Look, man,
I was like,
here's the one thing I've learned. Life happens, stuff happens. It's all good.
But we made it. Here I am in South Carolina. Where are you, California?
I'm in Los Angeles, California, yes.
Okay, you living out there?
I do. I've been out here since 1993.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking you were in Tennessee. In the Nashville area.
No, sir. No, I moved from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a little town outside of Pittsburgh, actually, in 1993. And I've been here. If I haven't been here, I've been on a tour bus.
Okay. So you grew up in Pittsburgh a lot of your younger life.
Yeah.
Were you?
I grew up in a small town called Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, which is about a little bit outside of Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh's where it was happening, and that's where we'd go to do what we did.
Yeah. That sounds like a movie town, Beaver Falls.
Yeah, if you saw The Deer Hunter, that's what it was like when I was growing up.
Okay.
You know?
So did you grow up around music?
I grew up in a house that had, my father listened to a lot of music when I was a little kid. So there was music around, but not necessarily musicians, but there was music around. And from a really early age, man, it was like, I don't know, like my life just seems like there's a soundtrack to it. Like I always equate when I hear music, like from when I was growing up, when I was a little kid,
Yeah.
I have, it brings back memories in a way that maybe some sense due to people and things like that. Music is kind of it for me.
Okay. What were you listening to as a kid?
My father was into original outlaw country. So Waylon and Willie were very popular in my household. And then he listened to like 50s doo-wop. He had a really eclectic mix of music that he liked. He had Sly and the Family Stone Stand. I remember that. And I remember, David Allan Coe. And so it was like this weird mix of music that my father was into. Some of it was like redneck country, David Allan Coe. Some of it was like progressive Sly and the Family Stone. And it was the Temptations. And it was, it wasn't a lot of rock and roll. Rock and roll is kind of where I went rogue on the whole situation.
Right. Now, did your dad play?
My dad was a great dabbler. So there was a saxophone in the house for a minute, and there was an Epiphone acoustic guitar leaning in a corner, and he knew 3 chords and would make up funny songs and get us all to laugh. And that was kind of about it.
Okay.
So he was not a musician.
So how did you find music and instruments?
I don't. Trying to think, how did I find? I know from a really early age I wanted to be a drummer really bad. Like I think it was probably went from beating on pots and pans to I discovered Kiss, and Kiss was the first band that I was like, I got Kiss Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
I think some kid in school brought rock and roll over to show and tell one day. And I was like, what is that, man? And it blew my mind. And then it just became a lifelong journey of just chasing that. So probably, a Kiss record, wanting to be Peter Criss and be a drummer. And then getting the toy drum set, and then, getting the big drum set one day,
Yeah. That Kiss always comes up. I talk to a lot of different musicians, and Kiss always comes up as one of the first influences for a lot of people.
I think for guys my age, and girls for that matter, I mean, it was just one of those bands that was my God, monumental.
Yeah. I think you're probably only a few years older than me. I'm 48, but
just a couple years older.
Yeah. So I had I remember the Kiss Alive 2 album, and I believe that came with, I think it was that album came with tattoos, temporary tattoos.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. So when I was in school, I don't remember what grade it was. It might have been 1st or 2nd grade. I don't know. But we had a Halloween. We got to dress up for Halloween. And I had one of those old plastic costumes that make you sweat. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So I was wearing one of those with the mask on, but we had to move seats. The teacher had to guess who was who. But I had an Ace Frehley tattoo on my hand. And the teacher knew that, so I didn't win that game. She picked me up.
No, that's great.
All because of Ace.
Yeah.
So you wanted to be a drummer?
Yeah, I was a drummer. Drums
were
my first instrument. Yeah, absolutely. I played the drums until I got my first guitar. I got my first guitar probably around the age of 16, maybe 17, and there's a whole story behind that. I'm sure we'll get into that. But so I was a drummer, and still fancy myself a little bit of a drummer these days.
Yeah.
Not afraid to get behind the drum kit. I don't have the chops but I can certainly, when I'm in my studio now, if I want something, I can get behind the drum kit and kind of
get the idea,
pound it out, and then get the idea across.
Yeah. Did you play in bands as a drummer?
So I was in the band in junior high, but then where I grew up, you either had to be in the band or you had to play sports. There wasn't like this, probably the way it is now, where you can do both. So I opted to play sports, and gave up being in the school band. Playing a snare drum but always played in rock and roll pickup bands with people in the neighborhood and stuff like that.
So what sport did you play?
I played, well, growing up, we played everything because we were kind of out in the sticks a little bit. So I played every sport that you could play: baseball, basketball, football.
Well, that was the thing back then. I mean, you went outside and played. We didn't have video games.
Yeah. No. I mean, the rich kids had Atari, but that wasn't us.
Yeah.
So that's what we did, man.
Did you play in high school sports?
I did. I played high school sports and played the drums through that. And then probably like my senior-ish year, somewhere along the way, I became aware of songs and songwriting and decided that I needed to pursue that. And as a result, I figured the drums were pretty hard to write a song on.
Yeah.
So I sold my drum kit to a neighbor and self-funded my first guitar.
And were you self-taught?
I've taken a few lessons over the years. I've always had guys around me that were better guitar players.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, like having them show me stuff was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty self-taught, I would say.
Yeah. Nowadays, you just go on YouTube to learn to play.
I mean, it's a little nuts. I couldn't, you had to, I'm going to really date myself here, but we had to either rewind the cassette or drop the needle on the record.
Yeah.
And that's how we figured it out, man.
Didn't you hate when you're trying to put that needle on the record and you just couldn't get it in the right spot?
Yeah, and you had to keep going back and doing it again.
Just keep scratching.
But you know what? I mean, just kind of like everything else, we could talk about, the old days and back when I was a kid. But, we really had to work for anything that we got, whether it was information about an artist. Like I remember waiting for Rolling Stone magazine to come out and waiting for Cream magazine to come out and just really hanging on that stuff, man. And that's not the way it is now.
No.
It's all right there for you.
And you just get it so quick, the information.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So when did you start in your first band? How long did it take you?
So I transitioned. Well, I'd always been in pickup bands as a drummer. I had my house was the house that, since I was the drummer and we weren't like in the city where everyone was close, everyone's parents would drop them off at my house and with their guitar amps and stuff. And then they would all bicycle back home or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So everyone left their gear at my house because I was the drummer.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So during the week, I kind of had all these instruments to kind of, play with in my garage. And that's kind of where I started, I'd pick up the guitar and someone would show me a chord and I'd like, oh, okay, I got a chord, and I would try to learn a song and do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. And then when I just graduated from high school and there were some local guys and I just, I was at this point, I'm obsessed with Keith Richards and the Rolling Stones.
Sure.
And decided that, and Aerosmith and AC/DC and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and Cheap Trick. And I just wanted to play songs. I didn't care about playing lead guitar. I wanted to be a rhythm guitar player. So I actually got into a band with the best musicians from around the area that I grew up. And in that band was the best guitar player that anybody had seen.
Okay.
So that guy was like, let me help you. I need a rhythm guitar player. And so he kind of showed me some of the ropes of what that was about. Phenomenal guitar player. And I became the rhythm guitar player in that band.
You still talk to him?
I haven't talked to him in a while. I talked to a few other guys that are in that band, though. I know those guys are still kind of all around. And I do check in on my hometown. I did a lot more when I was on tour, but I still check in on those guys.
That's cool. You're still in touch with them.
Oh yeah. I'm still friends with a lot of people I went to high school with. There's, growing up in Western Pennsylvania and being in that, I've really tried to make sure that I don't forget where I come from.
Yeah.
Those are my people. I go back for Steeler games all the time. Yeah, dude.
Yeah. Steelers, huh? I'm a Buccaneer fan. I'm a Tampa guy.
You finally had a good year.
Yeah. I've been a fan since the orange and white. So,
Wow.
I tell people I'm a Buccaneer fan, and they all think it's because of Tom Brady. But I say no. Unfortunately, I've gone through it all.
Yeah.
But-
Damn.
So you got in this band, and you guys, were you playing the clubs, or what was going on with this band?
So that band was playing covers, like 2 sets that we would play where you would do 3 sets a night. So we would do 2 sets of covers, and then in the 3rd set we'd start sneaking in some original songs. And I didn't know anything about writing songs, but the guys that I was playing with were really hip early on to writing songs. And that experience with those guys really informed me later in how I approach songwriting and all that stuff. It was really, I didn't know it at the time, but it was really some fantastic training for, like, I didn't know what a bridge was and why you needed an introduction to a song. I mean, I knew I was playing songs, but
Right.
it's pretty awesome, man. When I look back at it, those guys taught me so much about writing songs.
Yeah.
So we were doing covers, and then we would do our own original songs, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, playing covers,
Pretty cool.
I think. I play bass myself, and I remember when I was learning, playing cover songs was probably some of the best lessons that I've had.
I mean, I learned so much about playing other people's songs, and I find it, like, I know that there are people out there that only play their own songs. I'm like, how did you not, like, learn someone else's song?
Right.
There's no greater education than the masters that have went before us.
Sure. It's very valuable tool by learning other people's stuff.
Yeah.
So what year are we at this? I'm just trying to get a picture of the timeline here.
Okay, so I graduated high school in 1987.
Okay.
So we're talking 88, 89.
Okay.
Around in there. Yeah.
So we're at this point. Were you getting into all the hard rock that was coming out? The LA
Yeah, I
scene
mean,
stuff?
there were a few things that I was really into. Most of the stuff that I was into was older stuff, like of the newer bands that were coming out. Like, I liked the Black Crowes for sure, and I liked Tesla. I wasn't really a big fan of a lot of what later became referred to as like hair metal, or but it was certainly all around me. And I'm not saying I never played that stuff in a cover band.
Yeah.
But I liked it a little bit more. I liked the Stones, and I had this pivotal moment where I was watching TV, and on PBS, a show came on, and a guy named John Hammond Jr. was playing on a dobro with a harmonica, and it blew my mind. It completely blew my mind. I'm like, what is going on there? And I got hip to, and simultaneously, I'm down the rabbit hole of the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, and learning how they went to American blues artists and basically plugged it into Marshalls and Les Pauls and made this music. So I'm kind of getting Keith Richards telling me about American guys like Petty and Mellencamp talking about the Stones and Zeppelin, and they're talking about the blues. So I got hip to this blues thing, and then I saw John Hammond, and I'm just like, man, what's going on? This is insane. I got to know more about what this is all about. So that's where I went down the rabbit hole of playing blues and playing slide guitar and playing in open tunings, and that whole thing came from. That's where that all came from.
Sure. Okay, so then you went through the whole local scene there and then headed out to LA.
So I was in college. I went to a 4-year college, and about halfway through, I decided that I didn't really want to finish college. But since I was putting myself through school, because I didn't come from a family that kind of had the means to fund that.
Sure.
I realized that I was in debt with some student loans and my own hustling personal investment, that I didn't want to end up in debt with nothing to show for it. So I forced myself to finish college. I got my 4-year degree.
What's
I was
your
playing
degree
in. I have a degree in criminology.
Criminology. So you wanted to be what? What did you want to do in that field?
I didn't know what I wanted to be. I thought I wanted to be an attorney.
Okay.
I guess I thought I wanted to be an attorney or something like that. So I finished college and had hair down to my waist. It was 1991.
Right.
And I decided I wanted nothing to do with my degree, that I wanted to pursue music full time. So one of the jobs that I had done while I was working my way through college was I did labor jobs. So I worked for a tree company in Pennsylvania in the summers.
Oh, that's
so I
gotta be
went,
tough.
yeah, cutting trees and doing landscaping.
Yeah. In the summer.
Yeah. Dangerous work.
Yeah.
And hard work. So I did that until I went back, and I did that for like another 8 or 9 months, saved every penny I could, and decided moving to California.
And why California? Just because it was hot at the time?
Yeah, it seemed like the place to be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seemed like there were one or two places, New York or California.
Yeah.
It just seemed like all the music I liked had a better chance of coming out of California.
Mm-hmm.
And plus I had a friend that I met my freshman year of school that went for the freshman year and then left and moved out here.
Mm-hmm.
And we were actually writing physical letters to each other because there was no internet.
Right.
And he would just tell me, you got to come out. So I came out, I think, my senior year of college for a visit over the summer for a few days. And it was fucking freaky and it intimidated me. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know. And then I just ended up moving out here.
Yeah.
It just, it just
went
happened.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just went for it. And I remember specifically, like, when it was one of my aunts or asking me, when are you coming back? What's your plan? And I remember saying, I'm coming back in a limo or a bag.
Oh, geez.
I was just so serious about it. Like,
Yeah.
I got to go find out. And yeah, so I had no real plan B. I just thought, I'm going to go and try this out.
So you went out there, and I mean, how long did it take you to find a band or people to play with?
It's funny because I got out here and I was very clear on what I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't like a superstar shredder guitar player, but I knew what I liked. I liked to play an open G tuning. I liked to play slide guitar. I was a huge Faces, Stones fan. I loved Free, the band Free.
Yeah.
I loved AC/DC. I didn't really want to do anything that was kind of un-rock and roll. And I got into a band that was playing, and one of my other big favorite bands was a band called the Georgia Satellites.
Oh yeah.
And I got into a band. I saw an ad in this paper called The Music Connection, and for a guy that played an open G tuning with a Telecaster, and there I was with the Telecaster playing an open G. I'm like, this is perfect.
That's what they were looking for?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Wow.
I'm like, that's the only. Every other band was like, wanted somebody that was in Guns N' Roses or just some.
Yeah.
And this is the only band. And I answered the ad, and I got the gig. And I played like 2, maybe 3 shows with them. The band broke up, and I was like, Then I went through the really horrible experience of going out on auditions for stuff out of the paper, not even with like a professional. There's a professional placement agency out here, a guy that's been doing it for years, but I wasn't connected to that. So I was answering ads in the backs of newspapers, local music newspapers. And just sometimes I'd go there and they were just fucking horrible.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would go and they were way better than me. And they never called me back. And it was pretty brutal, man.
Yeah. That's a nightmare.
I didn't know how to manage nerves. I didn't know how to prepare. I had no preparation for how to even attack this.
Mm.
So that's just kind of how it started.
So then where did you meet up with Josh shortly after that, or how'd that all happen?
So I moved out here in '93, and I met Josh in '96.
Okay, 3 years.
And yeah, so that's about how long it took. I dealt with a lot of personal stuff while I was out here too.
Mm.
I didn't know it, but I was a full-blown alcoholic
Mm.
and about to go down the rabbit hole of drug addiction that I had no idea was in front of me. So when I got here, it was kind of the perfect storm for a lot of that stuff to really rear its head and play out.
Probably not the best place to be at that time, huh?
Probably not in this, in LA by myself. Yeah, not really recommended. But you know what, man? I lived through it.
Yeah.
I got sober. I've been sober ever since. And
congratulations.
And clean, and thank you. And sober and clean and all of that stuff then. And shortly after, I was about 6 months sober and I met Josh.
Wow. So you got that all out of the way before becoming successful.
Thankfully, because I don't know if I would have lived through it with the way I was operating.
Yeah.
I had pawned my gear and, like I said, there was a lot I had to learn about myself because of just kind of where I come from and what it took to get there. So I got clean and sober. I met Josh. That's how we started the band. I started that band as a, fully sober.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah.
What so when you met Josh, was it?
So yes, we had a big song with "I Love the Cocaine," which is a lovely story about the joys of that drug. However, by the time I always like to tell people I did a pickup truck full of cocaine. I just didn't do it while I was in the band.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, so when you met Josh, was he sober or was he going through some stuff?
I think he had, found his sobriety as well.
Nice. Okay.
I know he had. I don't want to speak for him.
Yeah.
But he has spoken very publicly about that. So we were both sober. Yes.
So when you guys met, did you know was it a natural fit? Did you know, this is the guy I'm going to work with?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, we both come from different places, man. But we met in the middle at like AC/DC.
Okay.
So I'm from like classic rock and blues to AC/DC. Mm-hmm. He's from like AC/DC to fucking independent punk rock and where he was coming from at the time. So, but where we met in the middle was like AC/DC. So he would turn me on to like punk shit that I never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And I would turn him on to like Free and Bad Company and stuff. So there was definitely that going on.
Yeah. Well, it worked.
Yeah. And I'm not going to get a whole lot into the nostalgia in this conversation, but I know that you want to have some questions answered about all that. So I will indulge that.
So when you guys, after you met, how long did it take for you guys to get the original lineup for Buckcherry?
It took a minute. There was a lot of people in, we played with, I remember playing with one bass player that didn't have a tuner. He was tuning it by ear. And he plugged into the PA, like just nightmare shit.
Yeah.
He plugged into the PA, didn't bring an amp, came down with a bass with no case. It's like, what the fuck is going on? It was weird. It was weird.
Yeah.
And we were playing at a rehearsal room, an hourly room where I used to score drugs or on the corner. Cause it was just crazy. It was nuts. I don't know what I was thinking, but I went for it.
Yeah. So when did you get your record deal?
The record deal happened. So it probably took about 6 months of us playing with people before we landed on what would be the original lineup of the band.
Okay.
And Jonathan, Devin, and Devin Glenn. That was the four of us were the original lineup of the band.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably took 2 years.
Okay.
But I will say this, before we even had a band, Josh and I rented a rehearsal space, which is unheard of. because you don't go rent a lockout in LA with no band. And we were just like, fuck it. This is going to happen. We're going to do this. Let's go rent a rehearsal space. And we went and we rented one.
Just did writing?
And just like, and we had this work schedule. We rehearsed 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
We all got together and we would rehearse I had band rehearsal every night at 7:00.
Mm-hmm.
Just what you did. It's just what we did. It was our clubhouse. It was our community. It was our, then we could go out to shows together that night, and we would or go hang out in Hollywood or do what, dudes in their 20s do in Hollywood, except I was doing it sober. But it doesn't mean it was any less crazy.
Yeah.
But that's just what we did, man.
And you
I had
guys,
so many good times with those guys. Like JB and I used to go out and hit all the bars together, and we had some crazy times, man.
so you guys did the whole scene out there, I'm sure, before blowing up when your record came out, correct?
Yeah, well, truth be told, there wasn't much of a scene compared to what was going on in the heyday of the Sunset Strip. By 93, 94, I was kind of waiting. By the time we were a band, 96, 97, 98, there wasn't a ton of that scene on the Sunset Strip that you've heard so much about. That wasn't really a thing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That wasn't really a thing.
Right. So when your album came out, the first single was Lit Up off that, correct?
Yeah.
So that, you guys came out of the gate just hands are flying.
Well, that is a song that we wrote in about 15 minutes. Like I was,
Usually the best ones only take a few minutes, right?
And he started singing that, and I was playing that, and there you go. Let's go here for the intro, and let's do this, and let's put a guitar solo here, and so that's kind of how it worked.
Whose choice was that to release as the first single?
I think, oddly enough, in the early days, we would open the show with that song. Okay. And then later on, towards the end of my tenure in the band, I was like, we need to fucking open up with that song like the old days. Yeah. Just fucking hit them over the head. What a great opener.
Yeah.
Well, in the early days when that was the only, I don't like to use the H word, but when it was the only well-known song,
mm-hmm.
you had to save that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You couldn't go out and play that one first.
Yeah.
Especially if you're opening up for a band in an arena or something like that, you want to play that last so you can play it for the most amount of people. But then after we'd had a few more songs that were well-known, then we would play that song first.
Did you tour heavily on that album?
Heavily. We've toured heavily, during my tenure in the band, we toured heavily on every record.
Yeah. Who'd you go out with on that album?
Who did we tour with on that record? Well, the first tour we did was with Kiss in Europe, which was crazy.
That had to be mind-blowing.
Completely mind-blowing. It was the first time I'd travel outside of the United States. It's the first time I'd ever been in an arena when I didn't buy a ticket to see the band. We went over to Europe and we did like 28 shows in support of them on the Psycho Circus tour.
Uh-huh.
And they had the original lineup. So Peter and Ace were in the band, and it was fucking awesome, man.
God.
I remember we flew into Helsinki, Finland, and the snow was above the cars. We landed in January, and the snow was up above the cars. And I was like, this is just like, and it was dark 24 hours a day. This is crazy. Yeah. I'm on the other side of the world. People live here. But it was an amazing experience.
That is awesome. Yeah. Now,
and the guys in Kiss were so good to us.
Were they? I always hear good things about those guys.
They were. I mean, Paul went out of his way every day to like engage with us. He'd see us in catering, and he was very like encouraging, and Gene was cool, and Ace and Peter weren't around much, but they were just great to hang out with, man.
Yeah. So you guys toured on this album and then went in, recorded Time Bomb. Now that wasn't as successful as the first album. Is that right?
It was not.
Yeah. What happened with that, you think?
I think that we fractured our relationship with our record label by doing what young, naive artists do, is thinking they know everything, and we're going to take the power back. And we fired our manager, and we hired a mixer that they didn't approve of to mix our record. And, we did some damage there.
Yeah.
And naively thought that we could get away with it because we were just going to go out and be more successful than the last time, not realizing how vital having a label support behind you is, especially when you need things like tour support to go back to Europe and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, if they're not
So-
going to be behind it, it's not going to get much.
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to know. No one's going to know your records out there if the big machine isn't out there, is pumping it out. So, yeah, we learned the hard way.
Hmm.
We learned the hard way.
Now, you guys split after that album, didn't you? Was it that one?
And we split after that record, yes.
Yeah. Was it just all the pressure and the not being so
I-
successful, or?
I think it was a combination of a lot of stuff, you know. We had, yeah, I mean, with the interpersonally, people weren't really getting along that well.
Mm.
And it was, you know, it was a lot of pressure. I think, I know Josh went and did a solo record after. I think he wanted to go do some other kind of music. And it was just time for that thing to just go away.
Mm. I mean, what were you thinking after that? I mean, because you were only around a few years.
I was thinking, wow, I've so overachieved anything I thought would ever happen to me.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I'm going to get on with my life. And by that point in time, I had a young daughter, and I had to go figure out what I was going to do with my life. But I knew that being in LA is where I wanted to be, and I kind of wasn't willing to like go home.
Yeah. Were you planning on staying in music?
Yeah. So what
Okay.
I did was I had acquired a significant collection of guitars and amps and stuff like that I because I was just really into all things studio. I didn't know much about being in a studio,
Mhm.
but I knew that I really liked being in a studio and working in a studio. And I had like collected some amplifiers and some guitars, and I started to guitar tech for a record producer, tuning guitars and bringing in my amps and just working in a recording studio.
You probably learned a lot from that.
I learned a ton from that. It was like on the job training that I never thought I'd get.
That's awesome. So then
Yeah.
what made you, then you guys got back together a few years later.
Yep. And so my father died, and I had kind of fell out of touch with Josh. My father passed away. Josh got in touch with me because I was actually friends with Stevie D, and Stevie was friends with Josh. And I think he was kind of like quietly plotting some sort of getting us reconnected, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And so my father died, and Josh reached out to me immediately and was just like, hey, I heard that your father died. And I go, yeah, I'm on my way to the airport tomorrow. And he's like, meet me on your way to the airport. So we met, and he was like, told me what was going on with him, and asked me, it came up, you know, maybe we should make some music together again. I'm like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and dealt with all this stuff with my dad and back east, and got back and called him up, and we just started talking about the idea of maybe doing it again. But we were both working, like we both had jobs, and it wasn't like we were like independently wealthy sitting around waiting for the next project. Like
Right,
we had real world problems of like, I got rent and a
right.
you know,
Still got bills to pay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of how that happened.
So then you came back again on album was 15 that you did, right? And that had
Yep.
Crazy Bitch on it, which became a huge hit.
It did really well.
So here you guys are back on top, rocking after all this time.
Oddly enough, Crazy Bitch was written before we actually broke up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had written that song after we got off of the Time Bomb tour, and it was just Josh and I left in the band. We were in a rehearsal room, continuing to work, you know, and try and push it forward. And we wrote that song, and it sat on a cassette tape demo in a shoebox for 3-4 years while we were apart.
Right.
And then when we got back together to do the 15 record, we got the lineup together, and we'd written all these songs. Right at the end of that process, I said, you know, we did that song. We have a demo for this song. Let's just record it and see what happens.
Mm.
And I remember hearing it thinking it needs a new midsection. So I wrote a new midsection for it. And we recorded it.
Man,
We had no idea. We had no idea what was about to ensue.
Right.
Like literally, we thought we were just going to make a record. I thought we're going to make a record. We'll go over to Japan once a year. You know, we'll go do that. I'll keep my job. Like I had no, because I just didn't think that we were this. There was anything hip about us. I just thought we were a rock and roll band, and it just seemed so out of vogue that why would anybody care? But you know, I still wanted to make music, so I'm like, I'm willing to give it a shot. You know, as long as like I could make a little bit of money at it, because I had a kid. I couldn't just be a deadbeat. And,
sure.
You know, so that's what we did.
So, was that your most successful record?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Now, around this time, too, is that when you guys were kind of doing the Velvet Revolver stuff?
No, that was before, at the tail end of the band.
Before this record?
Yeah, it was at the tail end of, like, after the Time Bomb tour, and we had come home, and Josh and I were showing up to a rehearsal room every day, writing songs together with, like, different drummers, and I was playing all the instruments on the demo. Mm-hmm. On the demos, and that's when we had met up with those guys, and that thing happened.
Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening with that? Why didn't you guys end up doing that? I
mean, if you probably ask 4 different guys, you get 4 different answers.
Yeah.
I think that they just had something else in mind, and it wasn't Josh or I. Mm-hmm. I mean, Josh was actually out of that situation before I was. I stuck around for a little bit longer, continued to write with them, and then it was time for me to go too. So that's kind of how it worked. Yep. Yeah.
So then you guys put out quite a few albums after that. I mean, when your last album with Buckcherry was what, around 2015 or so?
I think it was the rock and roll record, 2016 maybe.
Okay.
Whenever that record came out.
So, and then you left the band, correct?
Yeah, I left the band in February of 2017.
Okay, so what was that a hard decision to say, you know what, I'm done, or what led to that?
A lot of things led to that, but ultimately it was time for me to go do something else. Mm-hmm. You know, I did that for 21 years, and I felt like I did it at a very high level, and I'm super proud of what we did. It was just time for me to do something else.
Sure.
It wasn't a snap decision, and it wasn't a fuck you decision, and it wasn't like it was. You know, it was a lot of different things kind of converging that pointed to me that it was the right thing for me to do. Mm-hmm. So. And
you still good with that decision?
Oh, yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, you seem like it. I mean, you seem like you're really happy. From what I see, you know, just online and talking to you a little bit, you seem like you're really happy with what you're doing.
I'm super at peace with it. And I was at peace with it then because I kind of figured that was what I needed to do. Probably about a year and a half or 2 years before I actually did it. Like I knew that was something that was going to happen. It was just a matter of how to do it in a graceful as possible way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to do it in the middle of a tour.
Sure.
I'm not going to do it out of spite. That's not where I come from.
Yeah. What's your relationship like now with those guys?
I have a great relationship with Xavier, who left when I left, and I haven't really had much contact with those guys, but I know they're out there working, and I do wish them well. And
sure,
you know, it's a tough time to be in a rock and roll band. So my hat's off to them. I'm you know, mm-hmm. They're out there doing what they want to do.
That's good to hear you say that. Sometimes, you know, you hear the opposite of that.
I mean, saying fuck you is easy.
Yeah.
Nobody wins with that. You know, right. Resenting them is only hurting me. And that's, yeah, I don't, they're, you know, we were in the trenches together where when I had my when my kids were born, Josh was like the first guy at the hospital. So
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, we went through a lot together. We may not have always liked each other, but you know, we were fucking down in the trenches together, and I haven't forgotten that. And
yeah, you never will.
It is what it is, you know? But at the same time, you know, you learn that you're in a rock and roll band with people that you might not normally associate with, and it's kind of like a job. And I don't call up my ex-girlfriends and check in on them and ask them how they're doing. But if I saw them in the grocery store, I'd say hello.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And if she's banging some other dude, all right.
Yeah, so be it.
Take the good with the bad.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great attitude to have.
That's really where I can sincerely tell you that's where I'm at with the whole thing.
Yeah. So you weren't playing in another band after that, were you?
No. So one of the things that I was getting a significant amount of opportunities to like work on other music outside of the band. And I was passing up things. Look, my phone wasn't blowing up, but I was, passing up opportunities to write with people, or I would start writing with them. Then I'd get pulled away by a tour, and couldn't finish it. And that was frustrating on a certain level. So when I got back from that last tour and the split was finalized, I started to focus my energy on working with writing and producing for other artists.
Yeah, and that's what you've been doing since, correct?
And that's what I've been doing since, yeah.
Okay.
One of the first things I was fortunate enough to do was actually work with Charlie Starr from Blackberry Smoke, who was a longtime friend of mine, and we'd never really worked together. And so we'd done everything but write songs together. And we became, as I was talking to him through my decision-making process, and he's like, well, hey, man, if you ever want to write a song together, give me a call. And I'm like, oh, yeah, let's write something. And so we just started writing songs very innocently of just like, let's just see what happens. He didn't say I need songs for my record. If you know anything about Charlie and that band, he needs no help. He's a phenomenal musician, phenomenal songwriter, but he was kind of grooving on the idea of collaborating. And I love collaborating.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you that, how you like doing that.
It's really, it's like dancing. When you have a good partner, man, there's nothing like it. Like, writing all that stuff with Josh and Buckcherry and watching it become successful. That's such a rewarding feeling.
Yeah.
Of, two guys, or two people, I should say, walking in a room with a couple ideas and leaving with a song that gets played on the radio and people dig. That's the best job in the world, man.
Yeah. So
the friendship with Charlie happened really organically. And, we wrote about 8 songs, and then he called me up one day and he's like, hey, we're going to go make a record. Mind if I cut one of those songs? I'm like, no, go ahead, dude. And he called me up like a week later and he's like, I didn't cut one. I'm like, oh. He's like, I cut 4. I'm like, what? So he took 4 of those tunes and he's like, they just felt right. And, he and I are really, really, really good friends. I really love that man. And we have a lot of similar things about our lives. And we're at similar places in our lives. It's pretty funny. Like when we talk, we compare notes. We're like, man, he always says, you're reading my mail, man. I'm like, it's crazy.
Aren't they getting ready to go out on the road?
Yeah, they just released another record called You Hear Georgia.
Yeah.
Or I think it's about to get released, but and he and I did a song on that record, and they're just great musicians. Great. They carry forth the Southern tradition in the most positive ways, not the most negative ways.
Yeah.
And I have so much respect for them as musicians and just as guys. They've been great friends. Charlie's been a great friend.
Yeah, yeah. And you guys did a collaboration with Mike Squires.
Oh, yeah.
On his video thing, yeah.
Yeah, we did the couch riffs. That was a lot of fun.
Mike's a great guy. He helped me out when I was getting this podcast starting. He sent me his number and just told him call him if I had any questions, and help me get started going with this, because I had no idea of how to get everything set up and what all that kind of stuff. So he's been
Mike's a great dude. I met him when he was I met him when he was on tour with Duff, and I also met Jeff Rouse, and Jeff is the guy that filled in on bass with Buckcherry for a while when the bass player was sick.
Okay.
So, great guys.
Did
great guys.
Scotty Hill fill in a show or so with you guys?
He did a little tour when the other guitar player was having a baby.
Okay. Yeah, I was just browsing around online looking up some stuff yesterday, and then I saw Scotty on stage with you guys. I went, wait a minute. Had to double take that.
Yeah, so we did a bunch of dates in we met those guys. I'm gonna have to switch to my speaker. Hold on one
Yeah, go
second,
ahead. Go ahead.
because my earbuds just died.
Yeah, no worries.
So we did a bunch of dates with Skid Row. Well, I'd met those guys in the first wave of the band when they were actually called Ozone Monday. Sebastian was the band, and I think we played the Stone Pony with them in Jersey.
Yeah.
And as a spring band, that was like, oh, this is crazy. So we met them way back then, and then we did a tour with them in Europe, and we all bonded up pretty good.
Yeah.
And I developed this friendship with Scotty. And then right after that tour was when Stevie had to go take some time off to become a father. And we all agreed that having Scotty fill in would be an appropriate move. So that's what we did.
Yeah,
And
Scotty, I met. I used to live by Scotty when I used to live in Florida, and I used to
Oh,
play.
yeah.
I used to play bass in a band called Big Machine that was kind of put together by Brian Johnson from AC/DC.
I was gonna say you must have been Brian's neighbor too, because
Yeah. So Brian put this with this other producer guy, put this band together, and I was playing bass in it, and that's how I met Scotty. So Scotty used to come out to the shows and stuff, and he's always been a great guy.
Scotty has become one of my best friends. He's
Awesome.
been just a champion of a human being, and a real supporter of me and I for him. And we're teenage rock and rollers that became grown up dads, and it's pretty nuts, man.
Yeah. Well, if you see him, tell him I said hello. I haven't talked to him in years. I mean, it's been a while.
I talk to him once a week,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah, tell him
Yeah.
Joe from Coffee Stain said hi. He'll know what you're talking. He might say fuck that guy, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been a while.
Right on. I'll let him know.
Yeah. All right, so you're still producing. I mean, what are you working on right at this moment? Is there anything you can talk about?
Yeah, a bunch of really cool stuff. I wrote probably 12 songs with a guy named Tuck Smith that was in a band called Biters, and 4 or 5 of those songs made it on his debut record, which has not been released yet. I co-wrote and produced and played guitar on a record for Ricky Warwick of Black Star Riders and Thin Lizzy. That just came out this year. There's another song on the new Blackberry Smoke record that it's about to be released that I wrote with Charlie. What else? I did an EP. I produced an EP for a band called Wayland. That should be out this year. I just produced a band from New Jersey called Palisades, like a heavy modern rock band. Fucking fantastic record. It's getting mixed right now. That'll be out this year. That's on Rise Records. I'm working with the Chris Roberts band right now, and kind of an Americana country kind of thing. Producing that record right now. I did a Good Charlotte song in December. I produced that, and that came out and it's doing really well. So I've kind of been a little all over the map, kind of going.
Been busy.
Yeah, I've been going, I like the fact that I'm not just getting straight rock stuff. Like I'm a little leaning right and leaning left, but all of it I think is really good songs and good people, man.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of fun.
You think you would ever get back into a full band situation again?
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I love playing. I will say I do miss playing live a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But my true heart and soul is in writing songs and making records. But I do miss it a little bit. I'm not gonna. If I said, "Oh, I don't miss that," that'd be a lot.
Right.
Nothing like playing music for people and having them and connecting with them. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Keith. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad we didn't have to reschedule or cancel this due to my phone issues.
You salvaged it, bro.
It was a close one, but we made it.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for your time today, Joe. And we didn't talk about coffee, but I love coffee.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to ask you about coffee. Now, you're really into the coffee from what I see online.
Yeah, I mean, I have a
I mean, you're doing
Bizarra
the press and
lever
everything else.
machine. I have a Bizarra Strega machine on the counter at home. That is a big behemoth industrial. Oh yeah.
Wow. Is that what you just posted not too long ago?
What I just posted the other day was a Flare espresso machine that I have at the studio. That is a hand pressed lever machine. It's completely different.
Man, I don't think I've ever had pressed coffee. I mean, what's the difference there?
When you're making an espresso, it basically operates the same way. You're forcing hot water through the coffee grinds through a screen.
Yeah.
The only difference is when you use the not an automatic machine, but say a manual electric machine, you have a pressure gauge that kind of all you have to do is relieve the lever, and it presses the coffee. With the Flare, you don't need electricity. You basically are applying your pressure by pushing down on the lever to plunge the hot water through the coffee.
Uh-huh.
It's just another rabbit hole of insanity.
How did you get into coffee like that?
By getting sober and realizing that there's only a few things left that I can really get my addiction on with.
Yeah.
Guitars, recording gear, motorcycles, coffee.
Yeah, I love coffee. You know, that's why everything I've done, like I had coffeestain.com, which I told you Scotty Joe from Coffee Stain. That used to be a music website for local Florida bands, and then when I started this, I added the coffee in for Rock and Roll and Coffee Show, just because I love coffee. But I never really got into the, all that kind of stuff with coffee.
So I tell you how it happened. I was in Europe, and I think we were in France. Jimmy Ashurst and I, bassist in Buckcherry, we went out to lunch one day while on tour. And we're sitting at this little cafe, and this guy brings us he brought me an Americano and him an espresso. And I'm sitting there drinking this black Americano. And I, at the time, didn't drink black coffee. And I'm drinking it, and I'm thinking, this is so fucking good. Why can I not get coffee like this at home? So I got home from that tour, and I went down the rabbit hole of espresso machines. And I got like the big, expensive automatic machine where you put the beans in, and it's like you have a Starbucks at your house.
Yeah.
I'm like, this isn't it. I returned the machine. And then I got hip to this place in LA called Pasquini Coffee. And I may have bits of the story wrong, but this is the way I remember it. Pasquini was he was an Italian guy that opened the first coffee shop in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And he had moved here from Italy and couldn't get good coffee. So he started to import coffee machines, I think in the late 40s, and would convert them to the proper electricity and open a coffee shop. And then as coffee shops proliferated in Los Angeles, he was the guy importing the machines from Italy. He's still here. I think he's still alive. And he still has a shop in LA. So I got hip to this guy. I'm like, that's the guy I fuck with. Like the OG dude from Italy.
Yeah.
So I went down there, and they made their own machines. And I started, they also import a line of coffee, whole bean from Italy. I'm just like, I'm in heaven.
Wow.
Because, so I was just obsessed with making like this really high-end coffee, but in my house, with a very expensive espresso machine, and I was hooked. And now, like, I will drink 7-Eleven coffee. I'm not a snob about it, but if I'm going to make it myself, it's going to be something special. It's going to be
you want the good shit.
Yeah, I'll make a good Chemex pour over if I want that. I will make sure I have the right beans and I'm doing it correctly.
What are the right beans? Like what makes the good beans?
Depends. AC Slade, who plays bass with Joan Jett, has a coffee company called Catfight Coffee.
Yeah.
And he just sent me some coffee, and it's really fucking good. And it's not like anything too tripped out and expensive. It's just really, really good coffee made by some really good people. So I like that. There's a company here in LA called Groundworks. They roast the beans about 4 blocks from my studio. And I go there and buy it in bulk from them because they're roasted. I can get it the same day it's roasted. It's phenomenally fresh. Or I get the imported stuff from Pasquini downtown that comes from Italy. So
you got the hookup.
I tend to like a bean that is not super oily. You know, like a French roast can kind of get oily.
Mm-hmm.
I like you know, not so much a dark roast, but like a medium dark roast made for espresso. That's what I tend to like.
I'm gonna hit up that Catfight Coffee, and I'm gonna get some of that. And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna learn more about coffee because I should know about coffee with the Rock and Roll Coffee Show.
I thought you were gonna fucking quiz me up about coffee,
and I let you down.
How the fuck does that work? I educate the coffee guy?
Damn it! All right, we won't tell anybody this.
No one will hear this.
No, I'm gonna edit this part out.
Are you really?
No, I'm not. No,
that's all right. I'm happy to share my dude. You got my info. Hit me anytime. I will tell you all of my coffee secrets.
I will. I'm telling you, I'm gonna learn about coffee, and then we're gonna do this show again, and we're gonna talk about nothing but coffee.
So I went down the geeky rabbit hole of learning how to make a pour over the right way. And long story short, I was in Portland at Kova Coffee, and I was the only person in there, and the guy's like pouring the water over top of it. I'm like, hey, can you tell me what you're doing there? And he's like, oh, and he explained how he does it and sold me a little kit there for like $80, a filter and a scale and a teapot or a pot to boil the water in and a Chemex. And so when I'm not drinking espresso, that's how I'm making my coffee. And I think it's just phenomenal.
I got to get my shit together.
Come on, Joe.
All right, Keith. Well, listen, man, I'll let you go. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me tonight. It was a pleasure.
You got it, brother. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
That's all for this week. Join us next week for another episode of the Rock and Roll and Coffee Show podcast. Available on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.